Tonight, the Syrian refugees coming to Canada aren't refugees. They're not coming from refugee camps. They're literally coming from apartment buildings in cities where they've been living peacefully for years. I'll show you the proof. It's February 19th, and you're watching The Ezra Levant Show.
Why should others go to jail when you're the biggest carbon consumer I know?
There's 8,500 customers here, and you won't give them an answer.
You come here once a year with a sign, and you feel morally superior.
The only thing I have to say to the government about why I publish it is because it's my bloody right to do so.
It's a monstrous lie, told on purpose. Justin Trudeau made a campaign promise to take 50,000 Syrian refugees by the end of 2015, and he couldn't keep that promise. But instead of admitting that, he's resorted to tricks, misdirection, and outright lies. The idea that Canada could properly select and vet refugees from terrorist central, check them for ties to violent groups, check them for health, check that their stories add up, all in the Arabic language, where there are no reliable government records, where corruption is rife, that idea was never going to work. But instead of admitting all this after the election, the Liberals doubled down. They brought compliant journalists with them to a beautiful, state-of-the-art refugee processing center in Jordan, where reporters weren't really allowed to do anything other than point their cameras where the Liberals told them to point them. But it looked good, doesn't it? I mean, take a look right there. Everyone was smiling, the Liberals and the Liberals in the media. But certain things just didn't fit. They didn't add up. Like when we asked for a copy of the questionnaire that those refugees were being asked at these refugee processing centers, and we were told that no such questionnaire existed. Here, look, seriously, that's what the Access to Information Department told us. But how could that be? I mean, we saw smiling Canadians filling out forms on computers. Surely it wasn't all fake. We asked other questions of the government, basic questions about refugees, and we were told we'd have to wait up to 300 days to get an answer. Government departments are supposed to reply in 30 days. They wanted nearly a year for the most basic information. Why? They wanted to hide something, but what? But then yesterday in a bombshell, in a parliamentary committee, Martin Bolduc, the vice president of the programs branch of the Canadian Border Services Agency, he was asked some very basic questions that no Liberal has answered so far, and he actually answered them. Here, listen for yourself. It's just incredible.
Most of the 21,000 refugees that have made it to our borders were now housed in camps. They have been living in theater for a number of years, renting apartments. So I just want to that for the precision. They're not housed in camps administered by the UNHCR.
Yeah, can you give me a breakdown? How many from camps? And
I wouldn't be able to tell you the 21,000, how many, but very, very few came out of camps. Most of the people were already living in the countries where we are operating.
Yeah.
Now, we knew these Syrians weren't being brought in from Syria itself. They weren't in any actual war zone. They were in neighboring countries, in theater, as Mr. Bolduc says, but they weren't in refugee camps. They weren't people just arriving on foot or by car, tired, desperate, hungry, in need of shelter. No, you heard them. All but a tiny fraction were already living in cities in the area, not in refugee camps, not under the UN's protection. You heard them. They're in apartments. For years, he said, in Beirut, Lebanon. Now, 30 years ago, Beirut was wrecked by Muslim terrorism. The PLO was the terrorist group back then, and then a war, but it's being rebuilt. Look at it now. A bustling port, a luxury waterfront. They used to call Beirut the Paris of the Middle East. I think it's getting that back. If you were an Arab from neighboring Syria, wouldn't you want to live in Beirut? Same language, same culture, lots of Muslims. People sick of war trying to rebuild a life and succeeding, sort of. And look at that. But we are literally taking Syrians out of apartments in Beirut and apartments in Amman, Jordan, and in Turkey. You heard Martin Bolduc. They've been living in apartments for years, not in refugee camps, not in any danger. And we're flying them in a mad rush to Canada. Why? They're not refugees. They are not in that camp in Jordan where this propaganda video was made with the government of Canada. That processing center, that was a fake. You heard Martin Bolduc testifying. Only a very, very small number, he said two verys, only a very, very small number came from any refugee camp. The whole thing was a trick, a lie. What's so bizarre is that we're creating refugee camps here in Canada, slums, ghettos, warehousing these people. They don't speak English or French. They don't have Western job skills. They don't have Canadian cultural skills. And then there's our interests. They're going to be unemployed. They're bringing their healthcare costs here. And of course, the security risk. Why? Why would we pull people out of apartments where they have lives and jobs and schools and friends and speak the language and have a similar culture? Why would we bring them here at the cost of billions of taxpayers' dollars? To dump them in hotels at hundreds of dollars each a night? Here, look right now on the federal government's procurement pages. Right now, the government is looking to buy up hotel rooms in Victoria, BC for 450 Muslim migrants. Imagine dumping 450 people into downtown Victoria. No English skills, no job skills, no schools, no work, just dumping them in a hotel and dumping 1,200 in Vancouver. The most expensive city in the country, by the way. What are they going to do? Stay in cramped hotels forever? These families have 4, 5, 6 kids. Imagine being in a few hotels, doing nothing all day, going crazy. You're bored, you're dislocated, you're alienated. The young men are going to get into trouble. And if Europe is any guide, that means sexually assaulting Western girls who aren't covered up in the Muslim tradition. Regular crime, too. And of course, they will be sitting ducks for local Muslim imams trying to radicalize them. That's what's happening in Europe. I'm not just appalled, I am sympathetic. They were taken out of Beirut and Amman and Turkey from apartments they were living in and now jammed into hotels in a strange land after being promised the world. I'd feel entitled too, and angry and let down and disoriented. I'm guessing the photo ops won't be as friendly 6 months from now in these ghettos, because that's what we're doing. We are building ghettos. There's no integration. There's no absorption. There's no mixing. There's no making of friends who are Canadians. We're scooping up entire towns worth of Syrians and just jamming them into our downtowns. I can't think of anything stupider. It's designed to fail. Brampton, Mississauga, in the Greater Toronto Area, 1,500 people are going to be jammed into hotel rooms. In Toronto itself, 1,800 people. That's several hotels worth. That's a whole neighborhood that has just been turned into Little Damascus, a little slice of the Middle East. No English, no jobs, no schools, no entertainment, no recreation, just sitting in hotels. Hey, a little word of advice to Canadian women. Don't go walking by there at night unless you're wearing a hijab. Just a little lesson to learn from Cologne, Germany. Just these ghettos I've listed alone will have 5,000 people, and that's not including the military bases, like the ones at Kingston, Ontario, and Valcartier, Quebec, where Canadian troops have been kicked out of their own barracks to make way for thousands of these Muslim migrants. Yeah, that's a good idea. Put 3,000 Muslims at CFB Valcartier for a year. That's going to work out just great in rural Quebec, isn't it? This is madness. It would be madness if they were really refugees, but they're not. They're not fleeing anything. They are being pulled out of apartments and schools and brought here as some weird sort of liberal trophy, some sort of sport to reach a quota. They are being treated as political cannon fodder or background shots for photo ops for the Prime Minister. It's actually worse than zero because it's a lie being perpetrated in the name of humanitarianism. It's not. These are not refugees. They're certainly not the real victims like Christian Arabs or Yazidis or Kurds. This is a monstrous lie being told by Justin Trudeau and Immigration Minister John McCallum, and by every cheerleading journalist in this country that knows this scam is going on but doesn't care because they agree with the mass migration of Muslims to our country, just like is being done to Germany. This is madness. It's got to stop. Visit RefugeePause.ca to sign our petition to fight back.
Want to have dinner with Faith Goldie? Grab a drink with Brian Lilley. Talk politics with Ezra. You can do it all on the Rebel Cruise. This November, join us for great debates, gourmet meals, and gorgeous scenery as we sail from Fort Lauderdale around beautiful Caribbean islands. It's an intimate week where you can really get to know your favorite Rebel personalities and meet other Rebel lovers too. Space is limited, so visit TheRebel.media to sign up now.
I love Alberta. I've lived here my whole life and I'm proud of it. I'm proud of our free market, pro-business, low-tax, do-it-yourself attitude. And now, I'm watching my province get destroyed. We've all had hints of the NDP's radical views in the past, but no one actually thought they'd ever run this province. Not even them. And now they are. And the worst is yet to come. I give my sad forecast for Alberta in my new ebook, The Destroyers, Rachel Notley and the NDP's War on Alberta.
Welcome back to the show. Well, I believe this subject ought to be the #1 news story in Canada today. I mean, the whole issue of Muslim migrants, especially from Syria, has been top of the news for months, since the end of the summer, since Aylan Kurdi was found on the beach and his father, Abdullah, now being tried in absentia in Turkey for captaining the boat that his young son died from. 50,000 Muslim migrants a year coming to Canada under the Liberals. That's 200,000 over the next 4 years. It is the #1 story, the billions of dollars, the soldiers being asked to step off of Canadian Forces bases to make room for long-term refugee camps. All of this. And then yesterday, the revelation that the Muslim migrants who are coming, they're not from refugee camps. They're being taken out of apartments. They're living as, I don't know about citizens, but in apartments of Turkey here. Listen to the clip again from Parliament. We only have the audio because there were no TV cameras in there. Take a listen.
Most of the 21,000 refugees that have made it to our borders were now housed in camps. They have been living in theater for a number of years, renting apartments. So I just want to that for precision. They're not housed in camps administered by the UNHCR.
Yeah, can you give me a breakdown? How many from camps and?
I wouldn't be able to tell you the 21,000, how many, but very, very few came out of camps. Most of the people were already living in the countries where we are operating.
So they're not being administered by the UN. They're not in the camps. They have been in apartments for years. Joining us now via Skype from Ottawa is our friend, co-founder, and bureau chief at Parliament, Brian Lilley. Brian, this is insane. These aren't refugees. We're just lifting people out of apartments in Turkey and bringing them to Canada and calling them refugees.
Well, we're kind of putting them in refugee camps here in Canada, and we can get into that in a minute, and I get into that in my latest piece that people can find at TheRebel.media. But look, these are people that were living in apartments. Look, I get fleeing ISIS, fleeing the Assad regime, horrible, but we were told time and again that these people were living in camps, and that was part of the need to push hard, push fast. That's why we got to bring them in so fast, so many, so fast, on these timelines that we're just overwhelming even supporters like the Immigration and Refugee Settlement Services, be it in Ottawa, Toronto, Montreal, Hamilton, Vancouver. People that were on board with Justin Trudeau's refugee rush were saying, hold on, too many, too fast. And yet we kept being told, well, look, these people are living in camps. I mean, we've got to get them over here fast. No, they're living in camps now, Ezra, because they're being warehoused in hotels. We don't have the apartments. We don't have the houses. We don't have the facilities to put them up permanently. So we're making refugee camps here. Many of them are now saying, well, wait a minute, I was comfortable enough where I was.
Yeah. They were there for years. You live in Turkey, which is a Muslim country.
Well, hold on. I just want to make sure that people don't think this is just Turkey.
Yeah.
This is also Jordan and Lebanon as well, especially because Turkey doesn't have the UN High Commission for Refugees. So these people were living in apartments in Beirut. I'm told a beautiful city still, despite years of war and carnage and other problems. These were people living in Amman, Jordan, and yes, in Turkey as well. But they were in all three countries, living in apartments, living in homes. And yet, and I'll show this today, our ministers went to a refugee camp near Amman, Jordan, that houses 80,000 people. That could have supplied all 25,000 to come here on the Liberals' plan to bring in 25,000 by the end of February. Instead, we've got officials saying that almost none of them came from those camps.
Yeah. That was a bait and switch, otherwise known as a lie. That was a propaganda exercise. I remember that. John McCallum, Harjit Sajjan, traipsing journalists around by the nose. Look at this camp. Look at this. It was all a fake. I mean, I have never been to Beirut, and I know that city was a mess 20, 30 years ago, but it has largely been rebuilt. And I'm not going to say it's the greatest city in the world or the greatest country in the world, but for these Muslim migrants, if you're living in Beirut in an apartment and have been for years, you're probably, you know the language because it's Arabic. Your kids are going to school. You have some routines. You're part of the culture. To cut all that off, to be warehoused in a hotel in Vancouver or Toronto or a military base of Valcartier, there is no sense behind it. But I tell you one thing, whatever it is, it's not refugees. Brian, what's going on here? I think I know. I think this is a foolish promise made in the heat of the campaign that the Liberals are so stubbornly trying to keep so they don't look like promise breakers, but they're wrecking everything else from budgets to cultural adaptation to, most importantly, treating these refugees as like some points to score. I think this is just about ego, arrogance, and unwillingness to admit that they were foolish before. That's all this is. These are not refugees.
The only people benefiting from this are the people in the Liberal Party of Canada. This doesn't help the refugees. This does not help the immigration settlement services that are working with them and believe in Trudeau's campaign. And it doesn't help the Canadian taxpayer. So, put yourself in the shoes of these families. You have the government of Canada. You're holed up in an apartment in Beirut. You've had to flee your homeland because of war. I can't imagine what that's like. But you've settled into, as you say, a routine. And you're in an apartment in Beirut. Government of Canada says, come with us. We'll give you housing. We'll give you support. We will give you language training and job skill training. I will cite in the report that people can watch later on The Rebel, a family that says they've been asking for 2 months. Because they were promised all this, 2 months they've been saying to the Immigration Settlement Services, where's the language training you guys promised me? I came here, you promised me language training. I don't know what I'm doing. And he's telling the reporter all this through an interpreter. And the Immigration Settlement Service says, we are just too busy trying to deal with the inflow to be able to help you. So put yourself in the position of that family. That's horrible. Then you put yourself in the position of the Immigration Settlement Services. They've asked for a pause, and the government keeps saying no. And then think about the taxpayers. And I will lay out the numbers tonight. We know that we don't know the housing costs because we can't get those. The most open government in Canadian history has been very, opaque when it comes to how all this is playing out. But we do know one thing. They're paying $61 a day for every single refugee that's in a hotel to feed them. $15 for breakfast, $16 for lunch, $30 for dinner. Don't tell me those hotels that are getting these contracts aren't charging the maximum or at least close to it.
Yeah.
So $61. I break it down as a family of four, but we know the average family size is larger because the officials have told us that. But a family of four, that's $244 a day, Ezra. Could you feed your family for $244 a day or $1,708 a week? How could you feed your family? How well could you feed them for that?
Oh my God.
And instead, can you imagine spending a week in a hotel in a country where the weather's awful? I mean, think about the people in Ottawa, 51 centimeters of snow this week. You don't know the language. The weather's awful. and you're holed up in one hotel room with your 2 kids for a week, you would all drive each other crazy. Who is this fair to other than a glory project for the Liberals to say, look at how compassionate we are? But it's not compassionate to refugees, not compassionate to those helping them, and not compassionate to the taxpayers.
Incredible. I have 2 things I want to do before we go, but this is amazing. You've brought a clip from Aaron O'Toole. Remind our viewers who he is, set it up, and then we'll roll the clip.
He, in the previous Harper government, he was Minister of Veterans Affairs. He's a Durham area MP. That's just east of Toronto. And he's on the Public Security Committee that was looking into this. They even tried to start a study on the issue of security screening for refugees, and the Liberals shut it down. But he was sitting there as the officials were telling him about this, and he was dumbfounded. Still couldn't get the information he wanted. Check it out.
This is clearly an attempt by the Liberal government to delay examination of 2 things. When Parliament resumed, we asked for the Public Safety Committee to do 2 immediate studies. One on the Syrian refugee screening process, because there's a lot of genuine questions. The second was on radicalization. So we've been asking for weeks for this. And then, of course, this week, we hear the terrible tale of 12 young women from Canada going to join ISIS and have families, and some have had children. Minister Goodale has talked, and his office has talked to media about radicalization efforts, but they're blocking the committee from actually looking at this. So the 2 most pressing security issues facing our country, the committee is blocking, and that's really concerning.
Then, Ezra, every time that the opposition parties ask questions or the media ask questions, the government stonewalls, and you can see it in my report later at The Rebel. We ask about the how many hotel rooms are you using? What's the cost? They just tell us you can find out at the end of this project. They want 0 scrutiny on any level until everyone's in the country. Because it's being messed up top to bottom.
That's incredible. I have one last question for you. I believe, as I said at the start of this segment, this is the largest news story in Canada today. Yes, withdrawing our combat aircraft from the ISIS coalition is important news. But those were 6 aircraft. It's the symbol. But in terms of the scale of this problem, the 25,000 here so far, the 25,000 to come this year, the 150,000 in the rest of the terms, the money and the human cost and the lie. These are not refugees. I think this is the #1 news story in Canada. Brian, this was not a secret committee where Mr. Bolduc said that this was, we got the audio from the government. There were other reporters there. Have you seen a single other media source in Canada report this?
The best I can say is kudos to my old Sun News colleague, your old Sun News colleague, David Aiken, tweeted about it. Wasn't his column today. He had a column on a different issue, but there were other reporters around. I know there's a lot of committees. I wasn't at that committee because there's so many things going on, but other bureaus have lots and lots of people. They have lots of resources, or you can go back, get the audio, get the transcript after the fact. That's what I did.
Yeah.
It's not being reported anywhere except The Rebel because they just generally don't want to ask questions about this.
Yeah, they support it even though it's crazy. Well, folks, if you want to press pause, well, we've been calling for a RefugeePause.ca. Go to RefugeePause.ca to find out more and sign our petition. Brian, great to talk with you. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you.
Stay with us. After the break, we talk to Daniel Pipes in the exotic city of Abu Dhabi. That's next.
Looking for the perfect gift? Did you know TheRebel.media has a store? Make a statement with a t-shirt. Have your morning coffee in a Fearless Travel coffee mug. There's even an Ezra Levant bobblehead. It's a one-stop shop for the perfect gift. And don't forget to pick up something for yourself. Go to TheRebel.media/store to find out more.
Ontario residents are being hosed on electricity prices. The latest Auditor General's report says we've been overcharged by $37 billion over the last several years. That works out to nearly $2,800 for every man, woman, and child. Why? Mismanagement and bad policy choices from the Ontario Liberals. It's going to cost us billions more in coming years. Energy Minister Bob Chiarelli won't take responsibility. He's lashing out. It's time for Bob to go. If you agree, go to FireBob.ca. That's FireBob.ca and make your voice heard.
Welcome back. Well, the Muslim and Arab world is in flames, not just because of the so-called Arab Spring, but the mess in every other department, including the Iran deal. Is there a small island of success, namely the United Arab Emirates? This is something that I'm curious about, and joining me now via Skype from Abu Dhabi is our friend Daniel Pipes, the president of the Middle East Forum, who happens to be there. Welcome back to the show, Daniel.
Thank you, Ezra.
Well, what takes you to Abu Dhabi? What are you doing there? And I want to hear all about it, because the rest of the Middle East, other than Israel, is in flames. Looks like you're safe and in a stylish hotel room.
I am safe, thank you. And I've got an ongoing fellowship at a small institute in Abu Dhabi. Yes, to answer your question, things are going well. It's awfully precarious. Here's a small country of about 1 million plus subjects of the monarch, and about 8 million, 9 million foreigners, so 10 million in all, who are between Saudi Arabia, Iran, and Iraq, with enormous wealth. And things are going well, but it's extremely dangerous on many counts. First, there's Iran, only some less than 100 kilometers away, across open waters. There's ecological fragility. Nearly 100% of the water in this country comes from desalination. There's the fact that 8 out of 9 people living here are from other places and don't really have a loyalty to the country. There's the fact that the price of oil has gone way down, and they're running a major deficit. So there are lots of dangers, but at the moment things are going well, and it's a civilized place where they're very conscious of the Islamist threat and crack down hard, where people are left alone, whether they're subjects of the monarch or foreigners, to do as they wish, so long as they don't do anything that's obnoxious in public. You're pretty much left alone. I find it an attractive place to be.
Huh. Now, we all watched the amazing boom in Dubai, which is another city in the Emirates. It's like you say, a small number of citizens and a lot of, I won't call them servants, although many of them are, but construction workers and expat bankers and deal makers. Here's my question when I look at the incredible growth, the spectacular high-rises. Is it like those Chinese ghost cities where central planners with big visions say, let us build a city for 1 million people, let's just do it all at once, centrally planned, skyscrapers, parks, schools, airports, and nobody fills them up? And it was all a bubble, it was all a central planner's dream. Are there empty, unrentable skyscrapers? Is it a hollow place, or is there an organic economy, an organic culture there filling it up? Is it real, or is it all like the Vegas simulation of Venice, Italy, or the Vegas simulation of Manhattan? Is it just fake?
What you're describing more is Saudi Arabia than the United Arab Emirates, where there's central planning and where the government decides to build whole cities. No, that's not what's happening here. I can't tell you that every apartment and every office is filled. There is a rather optimistic approach to real estate, but it is organic in the sense that these are individuals and companies that are building, that are renting, that are developing. It's not a centrally planned economy. And there are certainly many frailties and there are problems, but it is real. I found the astonishing thing about Dubai is how many buildings there are. It felt like Hong Kong. Not like a Chinese ghost city, but like a Chinese real city, full of people, full of activity, traffic jams. Didn't seem to me fake at all.
Now, let me ask you, you mentioned that people are pretty much free to do their own thing as long as they're not too ostentatious about it. Well, let's talk about some obvious questions. Jews, Christians, women who are not covered up, gays. How would those people do in the United Arab Emirates anywhere? I mean, can you walk down the street if you're could Caitlyn Jenner, the transsexual celebrity, walk down the street, or would there be some sort of morality police? Can two girls kiss? Not that I'm recommending it. I'm curious if it's possible.
Yeah. Well, no one can kiss in public. But what you are assuming, and we all really do, is that this is like Saudi Arabia, that there's a religious police, that there's beheadings, that Valentine's Day is prohibited, and so forth. But this isn't like Saudi Arabia. It is much more relaxed. So you will see an array of clothing, from bikini to complete burqa. You'll see foreigners holding each other's hands, even locals holding each other's hands. You will see certain, I wouldn't say complete freedom of expression, but within certain bounds. You stay away from the government. You don't make trouble. You're free to opine as you wish. So this is not Saudi Arabia. The important thing is not to take the knowledge you have about Saudi Arabia and apply it either here in UAE or Kuwait or Bahrain, and to a lesser extent to Qatar. Saudi Arabia is a very special place. It's the one that's caught our imagination. For example, alcohol, completely prohibited in Saudi Arabia. Here, there are alcohol stores. You can go. Now, they kind of hide them. You have to look hard to get to them, but they're there, and they're full alcohol stores with a full range of legitimate purchases that you can get with a credit card. Or in the major grocery stores, there are sections that say prohibited to Muslims, and in there is pork. And what I find interesting, it's not just pork like big ham, but also, say, some soups that have some element of pork in them. So it's there if you want it, and while Muslims are not allowed in there, there's nobody checking the religion of people go in there. So these things are much more relaxed, and there are homosexuals here who, so far as I understand, are pretty free to do as they wish, so long as they're discreet. Mm-hmm. Just be discreet, it'll be okay.
Last question about this before I want to talk about your column in the Washington Times. I know that we're talking like a travel log, and plenty of people have visited Dubai and Abu Dhabi, but I'm curious because you have a different eye for things. You focus on political Islam. I think I know the answer, but why don't you tell me, what is the United Arab Emirates' view on accepting migrants from Syria or places like that? You've mentioned that it's about a 7 or 8 to 1 ratio, foreign workers to citizens. How are they chosen? Who's allowed to come there? We're taking 50,000 Syrians a year here in Canada. I take it United Arab Emirates is taking none.
You're about right, yes. If it's not none, it's very, very few. And I think that is something that one can legitimately complain about. Let me also go back to your question about Jews. There's a brand new international organization called IRENA, which is about renewable energy, the United Nations offshoot. And the Israelis have a mission in Abu Dhabi to it, and it's official. So things are more relaxed here than in Saudi Arabia. And I agree with you, there should be an openness to taking Syrian refugees, and there is not. I'm not going to say everything is perfect here. It's certainly a complaint I would make. But they don't really want to have a lot of Syrians who they don't know who they are and the like. And let me point out that as an American who is very upset about the Council on American-Islamic Relations, or CARE, one of the great boons in our argument against CARE is that the UAE has put CARE on its terrorism list. It considers CARE to be a terrorist organization, which is pretty remarkable and a very great help to those of us in the United States who are fighting this Islamist organization.
By the way, I'm not proposing that it's good for the United Arab Emirates to take Syrian migrants. I don't think it would be. I'm just showing the difference between a precarious state that knows where its risks are, that has a ton of money, versus foolish Canada. In our remaining, I appreciate these comments, and I mean, I read plenty of travel logs and pop culture reviews of Dubai and Abu Dhabi, and there, you even see some of the hottest rock videos filmed there because of the spectacular backdrop. So I appreciate your more political review of the town. But let's shift gears now to your latest column in the Washington Times on a different subject, which is water in North Africa. Always, since ancient times, the Nile River of historical importance. Tell me your latest piece about water and the risks of a battle over it in Africa.
Well, as we all know, Egypt is the gift of the Nile. The Nile is the world's longest river. What perhaps people don't know is that almost all of the water, 9/10 of the water, comes from Ethiopia, from the highlands of Ethiopia. And the Ethiopians have watched for eons as the water left their country and went to Sudan and Egypt. Well, the Ethiopians a few years ago decided to dam the Blue Nile. And this is causing panic in Egypt as they worry about their already insufficient amount of water going down further. And the Ethiopians are rather cavalier in saying, don't worry, you'll have as much or more water for various technical reasons. And the Egyptians don't believe it. And I think there's real trouble brewing as this dam is about to start collecting water in a few months. And I hope that some wise heads will deal with this problem before it becomes a political minefield and perhaps a military one.
We'll have to take a look at that. Daniel Pipes, we're out of time. What a pleasure to talk with you. Thanks for joining us. I know it's late there in Abu Dhabi. We'll look forward to seeing you again soon. That's Daniel Pipes from the Middle East Forum. Folks, stay with us after the break. Your letters, and I've got two big pieces of news. I'll tell you those right after these words.
So open-minded that the brains have fallen out.
What's the point that you're making?
The point that I'm making is that if you're going to propose a massive overhaul to the way the economy is developed in terms of carbon tax, cap and trade, other forms like that, it helps to have some science that is in fact settled.
We've heard you loud and clear. You can't get enough Canadian conservative news and opinion. Why not check out our blog? It's all your favorite conservative bloggers together on a page called The Megaphone. Go to TheRebel.media/TheMegaphone or click on the Megaphone menu from our main page to check it out. Welcome back, my favorite part of the show, viewer feedback. Peter writes, Rachel Notley is just the latest clueless social activist who managed to get elected in the wake of public anger and confusion. Like her comrade Bob Ray, Notley is simply unqualified for her present position. Canadians continue to sleep as the dollars fly down the toilet, but change is coming. Thank you for leading the fight against this sad state of affairs, Ezra. Well, look, Rachel Notley truly was elected by accident. Jim Prentice, the PC Premier, and Danielle Smith, the Wildrose opposition leader, they were firmly in first and second place heading into the election. And the Alberta NDP were in the low teens in the polls, way back in third place. But then Prentice and Smith, with the support of Preston Manning, thought they would pull a fast one on voters and decide in a secret deal to dissolve the Wildrose opposition, just dissolve it, no election needed, and merge. They were smarter than anyone. Voters were so disgusted they voted for anyone else. And as you know, according to the pollster Abacus, 93% of NDP voters in Alberta said they were just voting for change, not for the NDP's policies. They never read them. But it doesn't work that way in democracy. You mark an X on the ballot. You can't mark an X with an explanation or a footnote or a condition. You can't say this is just a protest vote. Obviously, Rachel Notley is taking advantage. She never campaigned on her carbon tax, for example, or on a war against farmers, for example, or on banning conservative journalists from the legislature. She's a destroyer. And so we have to fight her in every legal way we can for 3.5 years until we can throw her out forever. That's why a critical media is so important. Debbie writes, thank you so much for informing Canadians about Trudeau funding Palestinian Hamas terrorist organization. More petitions like this and others should be sent to our government. I think more Canadians will get involved more and spread the word much better this way. Thanks, Debbie. You're talking about my colleague Brian Lilley's campaign at StopHelpingHamas.ca. It's just the latest example of Justin Trudeau turning against Western values against national security, against our allies, against Israel, and turning towards Islam. But not just any Islam, radical Islam, political Islam, and in the case of Hamas and Iran, terrorist Islam. Bob writes and says, I've looked through all of your columns and must admit, I have never seen such tripe and bull shit in my life other than Fox News. Give us all a favor and give it up. Hey, Bob, if you've really read through all of my columns, that's a lot of reading. I mean, these days I sort of read my columns out loud into a TV camera, but the sort of columns I used to write for newspapers, if you read all my columns, that's hundreds, that's thousands. I'm impressed. You say you've never seen such tripe and BS in your life, but that's sort of like that old comedy routine back from before the time of caller ID and telephones. You know that old joke where the lady says to the policeman, police officer, I'd like to report a man who's making obscene phone calls to my house. Yeah, he keeps me on the phone for hours. Yeah, Bob, you can stop reading anytime you like. Not only haven't you stopped, but now you're writing to me. I'm not much to look at, Bob, but if I didn't know you better, I'd say you're in love. Folks, that's our show today and for the week. But I have two quick announcements first. We are having a Rebel cruise. And what I mean by that is we're taking our on-air personalities, me, Brian Lilley, Faith, Sheila Gunn-Reid, and other guests like Paige McPherson, Daniel Pipes, Milo Yiannopoulos, and we're booking more than 100 cabins on a great cruise ship, and we're sailing out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and around the Caribbean for a week in November. We'll all hang out together, we'll have dinner together. You can sit with a different Rebel guest every night. When we're at sea, we're gonna have some great panels in the ship's theater with Q&A sessions just for our Rebel cruisers. Now, when we're in port, in places like San Juan or St. Martin, obviously your time is your own to explore those gorgeous cities. You can find out all the details at TheRebel.media. I really hope you're gonna join us. Now, the second piece of news I have is that in a few hours, I will be getting on a jet plane and flying to Europe for a one-week investigative report into the mass migration of Muslim men. It will be a whistle-stop tour through different hotspots. It'll be a bit like our reports from Paris, France in November in the wake of the Islamic State terrorist attacks there, except this isn't so much about terrorism, but about the relentless cultural creep of political Islam and Sharia law and rape culture. I want to see what it's like over there with my own eyes and ears. I want to know if what Europe is going through now is what we're going to face in a few years here in Canada if Justin Trudeau's Liberals continue with their open borders approach to Muslim migrants. So wish me luck and safe travels. My friend Brian Lilley will be guest hosting the show all next week, so be sure to tune in as usual. He's going to be great, of course. I'll be back after a week with lots to show and tell, I'm sure. Until then, have a great weekend and keep fighting for freedom.